In session number 2, working with Adobe Illustrator, we're going to work on how to fill things different ways. And first of all, I will give you a peek at kind of what we're going to do. Alright, here's a finished copy of this, and let me just mark this up a little bit here. I'm going to take a paintbrush and let me change the color of this. Alright, what you see here, first of all, like these shapes up here at the top are filled with gradients. You see how, like right here in the center, this is a little bit lighter and it goes to a darker red, and this gradient kind of goes across this way, and then this gradient kind of goes down in that direction where it's light, and then it gets darker blue. So those are all filled with gradients, and that's one thing we're going to learn, is how to fill things with gradients. These are filled with patterns. Alright, you can see that they're not certainly gradients, and they're filled with patterns, and we'll learn how to do that. And then these letters down here are filled with a gradient, but there's an extra trick to filling text with a gradient, and I'll show you that. The other thing you're going to learn a little bit about is the text tool, or the type tool, and how to make text in Adobe Illustrator. The one rule that we have today is that on this assignment, you cannot fill anything with a solid color. I can't, not today. I want gradients and patterns, because that's what we're trying to learn about, gradients and patterns. And also we're going to learn a little bit about text. Okay, so this is kind of where we're headed. Now I do have, if you go to Drive L on our courses drive, I have a little PDF file. It says fills. It's called fills. And if I double click that and pull it up, looks like this. And again, the main idea here is about filling some shapes and some text with gradients, and we're going to use patterns as well. And you'll have to have Adobe Illustrator running to get that going. That's what, I've got some instructions there for that. And here's the task: 3 different shapes filled with 3 different fills that are not solid colors. All right, so notice that there's 3 different, well, I don't really care what shapes they are, but 3 shapes filled with 3 different fills that are not solid colors. Also on this assignment, you have to create 3 different text objects that are filled with 3 different fills that are not solid colors. Those are the rules of today's assignment. Not complicated, but to get your credit, that's what you got to do. Now, here's some hints. When you're working in Adobe Illustrator, you're going to need the Swatches panel, or you'll have to use the Swatches button. Now, here's what that looks like. Over here on the right-hand side, I've got this kind of marked up so you can see what that looks like. All right, and I'll show you where it is in Adobe Illustrator, but this is what it looks like. Now, also on the Swatches button, you're going to use what's called the Swatch Options button, and I've got an arrow pointing to that right here. So it just looks like a little kind of a list thing, and it's right next to the Swatches button. So you're going to need both of those, and I will demonstrate that to you in just a moment. All right, saving your work, you'll need to save it on your network drive. That's Drive H. If you need any help saving, please ask for help, and your file name today is just fills, F-I-L-L-S, because that's what we're working on, is how to fill things different ways. All right, 3 shapes, 3 text, filled with something not solid. Let's go back to Adobe Illustrator. I've already got it running. You'll have to get Adobe Illustrator running. I'm going to close this document here, and when I'm in Adobe Illustrator, I'll click File and New, and again you'll see this new dialog box. Now, the only thing that you, like last time, you can make a decision about portrait or landscape orientation, and it doesn't really matter. I'm going to do landscape orientation, that's sideways, so I'll click OK there, and I have my artboard and it's ready to go. Alright, so let's get to work on this. I'm going to come over here, and remember your shapes tool over here, mine still had the flare tool showing up from my last movie. But if you click and hold, you have all of these shapes that you can use. Now, for filling these shapes, I don't care what shapes you use. I'll just start off with an ellipse, and I'll draw kind of a big circle like that. All right. Now, again, remember, the goal of the day is don't fill them up with solid colors. So I'm going to come over here to the Swatches button over on the right-hand side of Adobe Illustrator. I'll click that. There are some things available right here, and yours might look different than mine does, but there are some things available. Now, right next to the Swatches button, you're going to see this little button that just kind of drops down, gives you other choices. Well, what we want to do is open a swatch library. All right, now I'm going to start with gradients here. So if I go over here to where I have choices about my swatches library, here's gradients. Now, when I look at gradients, these are all different collections of gradients, and this is where you can choose. You can decide whatever sounds interesting to you. There's stone and brick, and vignettes, and water and wood, and gems, and fruit and vegetables, and so you can pick whatever you would like. Okay, excuse me. I'll just pick some color combinations here. So I'll click that, and I get a floating panel that opens up that has these gradients on it. I can make that a little bit bigger if I want to. All right. So it's got these little swatches of different gradients that I can use. Now, here's one little danger that you have to kind of watch for. If I take one of these right now and I just like drag it and drop it on here, you'll see, nothing happened. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. This could happen to you, so it's a heads up. Look at the bottom of your tool panel. And remember, when we kind of talked about this in the first session of Adobe Illustrator, these two boxes down here at the bottom of the tool panel are for stroke and fill. Stroke and fill. Stroke is the outline of the thing. The fill is the fill of the thing. All right, kind of makes sense. Well, for this to work, for me to be able to take one of those gradients and apply it to that circle, I need to make sure that this little fill box right here is just kind of on top. See how now it's on top of the stroke box? And all you do is just click it. Just point and click. Same thing here. If I want to work with a stroke, I click the stroke box, and now anything I do applies to the stroke. If I want to work with a fill, I click the fill box. Anything I do applies to the fill. Well, that's what I want. I want to work with the fill of this thing. That's the whole lesson, is filling. All right. So now if I take one of these gradients and I just drop it on there, oh yeah, perfect. Now you can still, and there's a couple of places you can do it. I could come up here to where the stroke thickness is, and I could make that thicker. And if I wanted to come down here to the stroke box and double click it, I could make that stroke a different color. It's fine to do that. But the big thing of the day is working with these fills. All right, so that's one shape filled with a gradient. All right, let's make a different shape here. Let's move ahead. I'm going to make a star. I'm going to hit my down arrow and just make this, if I can get it to cooperate, my goodness, touchy. All right, there we go. Now you'll notice, and this will happen to you a lot as well, I made this star and it got filled up with the same gradient that as I used last time. Well, one of the things I want you to do is experiment with different gradients. I don't want the same thing every time. So I could just take another gradient from this color combinations right here and drag it up there and pow, nothing wrong with that. Or if you want, it just depends on how much you want to explore, I could go back over to the Swatches panel. I could click the swatch options. I could open swatch library. I could go to gradients, and then I could pick a different collection here. I had color combinations before. What if I wanted to do simple radial? I click that. Now what you'll notice here on this little floating panel, simple radial has opened up, and here's the samples of simple radial. But color combinations is still over here. So they're both there now. And if I want to do a simple radial gradient on there, I could just grab one, drag it, and drop it in there. And okay, all right, there we go. Cool. Wonderful. So I filled that with a gradient. All right, let's do one more shape. We have to do 3 shapes, 3 texts. So let's do another shape. I'll do a rounded rectangle. I'll draw that. And again, you notice, and this happens a lot in Adobe Illustrator, I draw that and it winds up with the same gradient as what I had before. Well, okay. That's one thing I'm kind of trying to avoid here. Don't want the same gradient every time. So I want to pick something different. I'll just grab something off of this simple radial and drop it on there. Okay, good. Got it. Great. Now time for a little text. I'm going to go over here to the text tool. Looks like a capital letter T. And if you click and hold, you'll see there's several different kinds, but I'm just working with this first one here, the type tool. So I'm just going to click once on here, and I'll type the word. I'm going to use caps lock. Plainfield. I'll use the word Plainfield. Now it's small and it's just black and it's very plain. So what I'm going to do is go click on the black arrow tool, the selection tool, grab these handles and make it bigger. And when you do that, when you have text selected, if you look on the control bar across the top, you'll notice that you can change the font if you want to. Change it to whatever you want. I'm working on a Mac, so the fonts that I have won't look you won't have all the same choices of fonts that I have here, but pick whatever you want. All right. And sizing it really works the best if you just use your black arrow and just size it up however you want it to be. Now, what I'm going to do to fill this up, again, no solids today, remember. So I'm going to go over to the Swatches panel and go to this Open Swatch Library, and I'm going to do patterns. Now when I come to patterns, there are just three choices here: basic, decorative, nature. But within those choices, there's some other choices. For example, if I go to decorative, I have a couple of choices here. So what's this Vonster patterns thing? Okay, well, again, my little floating panel that I had here, so you see it still has the color combinations, the simple radial, the Vonster patterns. Well, okay, I'm working with the fill, so I'll take a pattern here and just drop it on there, and I'll just click it and it fills it up. Bingo. All right, now sometimes when you're working with text, if you fill it up with a pattern, it might look better if you do go ahead and add a stroke to it. Right now it has no outline to it, so if I like come along here and say, okay, I want a black outline, and I bump up the thickness of that outline a little bit, it's not cooperating. There we go. Now I can read that text a little bit better. All right, so that's kind of a nice little touch. They're adding an outline to text. All right, so I'm going to get the type tool again. I'll click once and I'm going to say Quakers. Your text today can be whatever you want it to say that is school appropriate. It could be your name, or it could be, it's just got to be school appropriate. That's all. All right, so I'll put Quakers right there. And let's say I want a different pattern. So I'll go back to my swatches panel. I'll drop this menu, open swatch library. I'll go to patterns and let's do nature. And you got animal skins and foliage here. Well, animal skins are fun, right? So how about if I click on the zebra pattern? Oh, you see, I'm going to undo that because I had my stroke box forward here. So I'll click my fill box and fill that with a zebra pattern. Very nice. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and add an outline to that just because it's going to be a little bit easier to read with an outline. All right, now the last thing I want to show you here as a part of this movie is, what if you want to, I'm going to put some text on here and I'm going to say rock, okay, and then I'll take my arrow and make that nice and big. All right, so I've got some text on there, but I want to fill it with a gradient. All right, so well, it seems like it would make sense if I go over here to swatches and open swatch library and gradients, and what if I say, oh, let's get fades, and I take one of these and I drop it on there, I click it, and it's not working. It just isn't working. I would do a different gradient. Would that work? If I go open swatch library, gradients, and maybe, I don't know, metals. All right. See, they're not working. Well, here's why. When you're working with text, if you want to fill text with a gradient, there's a little extra step that you have to perform. And it's not that you have to do this on today's assignment, but I'm just tipping you off here. It's a heads up. If you want to fill text with a gradient, you have to go up to the type menu up at the top and do what's called create outlines. Now it's going to make it so these aren't really letters anymore. They're just shapes that happen to be shaped by like letters. So I'm going to do create outlines, and this looks exactly the same as it did before, ROCK, but it's not really text anymore. It's shapes that happen to be shaped like letters. So now if I click on one of these gradients, it works. All right, but it won't work until you do that type menu, create outlines, and again, I'm just going to quickly add a little, I went the wrong way there, a little kind of a thick outline to that. I think it looks better. So there you go. I'm going to wind up with 3 shapes, 3 text, all filled with something, and none of them are solid filled. That's what I want to look at today: how to fill with patterns, how to fill with gradients. So if you get this done, you're going to go to File, you're going to go to Save As. You have to make sure you get to your network drive. And again, I'm on a Mac right now, so it's not going to look the same, but over here on the left, the sub can help you with this if you need it. Over here on the left, you click underneath computer, you'll look for drive H, your network drive, drive letter H. Your file name today is just fills, F-I-L-L-S, and that is it. That's the assignment. All right, it's your turn. Jump in, have at it.